Seekers. This is Blake coming to you live from New Mexico, and joining me as always from Washington State, it's Bryn and Cody. How's it going, guys?
Hey, I feel like it's a lot of pressure to follow up a JCB interview with a hopefully interesting episode. We spent so long trying to get this fourth box filled with his head, and we finally did it. Now we're back to our logo.
Back to our regularly scheduled programming. All right. Should we hop right into the podcast? Cody, you don't have a lot of banter today.
I have a lot of banter.
You don't have a lot of banter.
I don't have a lot of banter. No, I'm just sitting there, just finishing up some tea.
Yeah. A lot of research today.
I think a lot of research tonight. I think I've been drinking tea and feeling very like classy and cultured and healthy drinking tea at night. But I've been adding a little bit more milk and honey every night, and I think I've come to the realization recently I only really like the warm milk and honey. Which is probably not quite as cultured and classy and healthy.
It's very Michael Scott cream and sugar.
Yes, it's very much along those lines.
Yeah, Cody also made me a cup of tea, and it just looks like a glass of milk.
it's just warm milk with honey.
It is very good.
All right. I don't think we have news today other than our massive interview with Jon Collins-Black that got posted. So, but yeah, nothing else to report at the moment. Should we dive right into Horseshoes and Hand Grenades?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cody, you are our Horseshoes and Hand Grenades lead today. What's going on?
All right. You go ahead and pull up the roadmap photo that I sent you whenever you're ready.
Sure.
So this Horseshoes and Hand Grenades is really based off of we're inspired by the chapter 1 roadmap direction that we I think I've referenced a couple times in the last couple episodes. I think it's one of the things that Bryn was really harping on there was in chapter 1 he says, these the words in these pages, I'm paraphrasing, but the words in these pages are going to provide you with a starting point and directions and end point, and it's a roadmap. And he talked about his kid mapping out a map of, I think it was Los Angeles, as like part of the narrative of chapter 1, which is obviously interesting in more ways in that it's in chapter 1. So kind of would be a natural time to, if he was trying to explain how the rules work per se, chapter 1 would be a great place to do that. So anyway, we had been talking about some of those things, and so I started kind of diving into trying to come up with possible solutions or methods of taking some items from the book and making it into a physical roadmap. So the first thing I started looking at was locations that are mentioned in the book. And it became very clear very quickly that there's just too many locations. If you use kind of the whole world, he's just constantly, I mean, it's all these different treasures that have come from all over the world. And he's just constantly mentioning different places and formatting it in different ways. So I very quickly went, okay, the treasures in the US, I'm going to narrow it down to just places in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I started looking for places in the US within the text. And noticed that he was formatting a lot of places very differently. Like sometimes he would just say like New York, and sometimes he would just say like a state, and sometimes he'd say like a city like Seattle, and sometimes he would say, I'm sure if we're looking at the picture, it looks like we are looking at the picture here, so you can see kind of the two formatting systems that I landed on to kind of latch onto, to kind of narrow down what I was looking for. Okay. So originally I started looking for where in the text does he mention full city, full state? Because it seemed to me kind of naturally that if it was of all the different ways to format locations, the full city, full states just kind of jumped out to me as the most kind of, I guess, robust as a clue, if that makes sense. So I started by charting those, and you can see in the photo here, we've got Dallas, Texas, Menlo Park, California, Asheville, North Carolina, Columbus, Ohio, Brooklyn, New York, Concord, Massachusetts, which looks like I spelled wrong in the picture, Clarksville, Tennessee, Tuskegee, Alabama, Seattle, Washington, Clarksville, Tennessee, a second time, Tallahassee, Florida, and Mount Vernon, Virginia. So those are all the ones that I found that were, like I said, city, state, full name of both.
Mhm.
And then I do have the asterisks on Dallas, Texas, because that actually comes off the copyright page where it says, ooh, I wasn't prepared to say exactly what it says, but I think I can flip to it here real quick. I think it was like, thank you to the Arkenstone part.
Right.
Some images were donated by the Arkenstone in Dallas, Texas. So obviously that's not part of the text. I think I would guess that he maybe could potentially have had a hand in how that's phrased. Could have just said donated by the Arkenstone in Texas. Anyway, that's very much besides the point, but that's where, if anyone's like checking my work and wondering where the heck I got Dallas, Texas from, that's where I got it from. So in doing that, I did also notice that there were 3 locations, and I think only 3 in the whole book, where he said full name of the city and then abbreviation for the state. And that was the Wilmington, North Carolina, or he writes Wilmington, NC, Clarksville, Tennessee, Clarksville, TN, and Statesville, NC. So
I just want to clarify. Can I
Yeah,
clarify
go
very
ahead.
quick? This is just part 1, correct?
This is just part 1.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
I just want to make
this is
sure that
just-
when you said whole book, we don't get people confused or comments that we're missing some.
Yes. Sorry, I'm really glad
Yep.
you clarified that. Yep. Part 1, I should say whole book minus part 2.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a believer of the separation between part 1 and part 2, even though I know that some of my previous theories, which were just ideas, didn't reflect that. So anyway, where I ended up on my spreadsheet is what's on the photo here on the screen, which is all the locations that are full city, full state, and then also these ones that are city, because there's only 3 of them, city and then state acronym. So then I started drawing it on the map, which I did. I would have liked to have done it nicer, but I ended up just going with old Microsoft Paint here. So it's just some mouse handwriting. So what you'll see there, the red circles are each of the locations that are full city, full state. And I ended up writing down the page number that they were found on inside the circle. And then the 3 green ones are the other 3, the full city, acronym, state. And then in blue is the weird Dallas, Texas one that could or could not be included. So I did that, and my thought was, hey, connect these. What I was hoping for, I guess, was that if I connected these in the order that they show up in the book, that there'd be something interesting. Obviously, like a letter would be interesting or a number. But I was really open to anything interesting. So I made those connections, and that's what's drawn here in purple. And I would call it not interesting. So I've got this data kind of distilled here, and I'm still looking at other ways that maybe I can make connections between these places. I do feel good about the decision to distill it down to this format of location, just because otherwise it just feels like too much and too, like it would be too weird to format them also differently if you start including all the different other ways that he formats stuff. So I like the idea. I'm still kind of toying around with the data a little bit. Obviously, there's not a whole ton of data points here. It's only like 10 or 15 locations. So I don't know that there's that much more I can do with them, but that's why it's the Horseshoes and Hand Grenades, because it felt like a really good idea, but I haven't been able to find anything yet that seems like it's helpful and a real solve.
Okay.
I guess I'm surprised that there was only this many specific cities and states called out in the whole book, which I think feels kind of optimistic to me that maybe we are supposed to be using each one. I would have expected this list to be a lot longer. And so the fact that there are only this many, I guess, kind of tells me or makes me feel more confident in using these specific locations in a certain way.
Yeah, and it could be that I need to have a longer list. I need to include more, or it's just like when blank was in Tennessee, or when blank was in Houston.
Apple picking in Oregon. I was rereading chapter 1 today.
Yeah,
And then,
apple picking in Oregon.
I was surprised there was no St. Louis on your list, but that
No
is
St. Louis.
just described by St. Louis only, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it would be interesting to take it the next level of like, yeah, do the next level, keep the data separate. Yeah, and kind of see like what layer that adds. Yeah, I might have to take this to a Google map and create a couple layers of pins and
Yeah.
overlay them on each other and yeah, see what that next level takes. But
Yeah.
it
No,
is
I agree.
interesting.
I think the reasoning behind distilling it down was sound at the time, but now I do think I need to go back and look at some of the other options for including more data points. And I think even if I just go through the first handful of chapters, I think it'll become very clear whether it's leading to anything or not pretty quickly. It's just,
Yeah.
again, I mean, we talk so much about what are the rules and pretty much in the whole treasure hunt and then all these different subcategories of treasure hunt. And it's just another example of that, of, hey, I want to make a list of all the places. And then the first question is, okay, what are the rules for the places I'm including? And
Yeah.
it says, he's in Sri Lanka, or there's a Sri Lanka sapphire on that's not even in the text, but the name is on the placard under the sapphire. Is that included? I don't know. So
Right.
yeah.
I guess, I mean, just like from the very start, I guess I got excited thinking through like, well, in theory, the starting point is Los Angeles because that's where we're being pointed to with the street map. And then we do have in chapter 1 the orchard in Oregon. So I'm like, well, I mean, it's literally one step. I'm like, well, at least it's still kind of going up the West Coast.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I would be interested in continuing to dive more deeply into that. But I do think this first pass that you did at it is what I think deserved to be done first. Like this is the first logical step, but I do think there's more to explore.
Little bit of a tangent, but related. I was talking with Brent in the car the other day about chapter 1. We referenced it a couple times already in this episode. And I feel like something that's really been just like stuck in my head for like a good week now, related to the roadmap thing, is when he says, like, the words in this book will give you a place to start, directions to follow, and a place to finish. And the thing that's really sticking in my head is this: will give you a place to start. Because I think in my mind, I've just been looking for, okay, the treasure box is at a spot. I want all the clues to point to that spot. And just like, I mean, exactly that. All the clues to point to one spot, and that's the spot I'm looking at. But if you really read that part and think about it, he's really making it sound like there should be an easier, ideally in my mind, easier way to get to a different starting location. And then he like literally moves you across the map to a finishing location. Yeah. So particularly that part about the words in this book will give you a place to start and then move from there is interesting. I've been thinking about that a lot recently.
Yeah, I think I'm going through with a little more fine detailed comb and trying to pick out places as well. Check my notes here. Just in chapter 1, there was one specific place, Bowers Museum, where Scotty had his gem collection at one point. I don't know if it's still there or not, but anyway, I was kind of on the same path today as well. So I think your spreadsheet approach to just collecting all of these different places, I'd like to tag in on. If you don't mind sharing that spreadsheet, I'll start adding specific place names as well. So
yeah, definitely. I think it's worth going down that road, pulling that thread, as they say.
And I
the
guess
unbreakable thread.
Yeah. Not to add a whole new abstract layer to it as well, but I do think like if this is going to be kind of our guide to the solve in theory, like I do think there's going to be a lot of like more abstract thinking about how to create what these pinpoints are as well in the chapters. So, whether the points are broken out by chapter, whether it's broken out in different sections or more creative ways, I don't know. But it kind of makes me think like, oh, when we were talking about like the one chapter really having kind of like a comic book Marvel type of theme, that one kind of feeling like it almost stood out independently. I guess that's kind of getting me thinking like, well, are we supposed to then correlate that to a specific superhero city? And that's our pinpoint. So I just think there's so many different ways to approach this, but if that is what we're supposed to be doing, it does feel like that is the level of detail that would be required. So I think there's a lot to unpack here. Hopefully it's not just a big metaphor for him walking us through the journey of the book. And
Yeah. Another thing that he said that always kind of trips me up when I start thinking about ways to approach this is when he said that there's a clue in almost every chapter, which would lead you to believe that there's some chapters there aren't clues. And I can't imagine there's any clues, there's any chapters in the book that don't have any place names in them, right? I
Probably,
mean, maybe there
probably
well,
is, but
true.
but
Yeah.
just thinking, I
maybe
would,
not
I
in the
would,
US, if
Right.
that's what we're
yeah.
focusing on.
I'm thinking of expanding this spreadsheet to just include any place in the whole world.
Okay.
And actually, that is originally what I started off trying to do, and it just became too overwhelming. I originally had a spreadsheet that like then had further columns for yes, no, so we could filter things like, is it in the US? Is it formatted city state? Is it formatted just state? Is it formatted just city? Is it, a handful of different things so we can filter the data and see if it changes anything.
Yeah, I'll go back to the other thing we mentioned in chapter 1. Um and parenting well can at times seem a monumental task. I mean, in our read through, we haven't really seen that many monuments in the traditional sense mentioned. So that was something I was on the lookout for, but it's been pretty light, let's say, for monument discussion.
Mhm.
All right. Any
Can I
parting
just
comments on? Yeah, go ahead.
can I just tack one thing on? And I don't know, I don't want to make people mad with this, but I think in the sake of I've been trying to go back and reread the introduction very thoroughly over and over. I've been trying to read the how to read this book section of thoroughly over and over because I do think there's so much value in that where it's like when you kind of get in the book, you really skim it over. Well, not skim it over, but it's easy to not come back to it. And just Cody saying that, and I think we all are very much in the camp of like the part 2 and part 1 are separate. But I do just want to call out in the how to read this section, he says, oh, where did it go? And remember, the 4 chapters in part 2 of this book contain primarily all you need to discover the location of the other 4 treasure boxes. So I don't know. Just I know that discussion continues to evolve. So I guess there's the interpretation around what is primary. Like, is that saying it's all separate, but you're gonna have to do additional research outside of the book, or is that saying you have everything you need in part 2, but there might be additional information in part 1 that can help you in part 2? So I don't know. I just thought that was worth throwing back out there.
Very
Sorry,
controversial.
it's gonna get everyone all worked up. But that is a quote from the book. So I just think it is fair to
Yeah, I'm definitely in the
I don't know.
camp that the primarily in part 2 probably, in my mind, references that you have to do a little bit of research outside of those individual part 2 box chapters, but not, I don't think it necessarily means in part 1 of the book. I think it just means, just take the Coltrane Circle, for example. I think there's something to that. And that's not in the book, right? You have to do some outside research to come up with that. And that seems
Mhm.
reasonable to me, but
Yeah.
it's my opinion.
I guess I maybe this all just goes back to what we kind of talked about in the interview is just there are things that he's clearly saying in the book, and I think there's a lot of discussion that maybe disregards some of the things that he's saying, or maybe it is intentionally open for interpretation. So I don't know. All that to be said is I just can highly recommend rereading the introduction, the how to read this book, which everyone has probably done. But if you haven't, take the time to do that.
I think we're going to go back and do that after we've finished the regular chapters and do an episode on how to read this book. And I can't remember what the other section is called. Introduction and how to read this book, I think, are the two sections. So looking forward to that, because I agree. You suggested I go back and read those, and I did find a lot of nuggets in there that I'll be reporting.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, again, like the second pass through the book is going to be much more eye-opening as well. So we'll have a lot more to say about it kind of at the end than what we would have heading into this before reading the book.
Right. All right. Let's hop into the mailbag.
Mailbag. We've got mail.
All right. A few email messages from our email address, tips.ttiunofficialpodcast@gmail.com. I thought Sandy sent in something pretty interesting. Let me see if I can find it here. She wanted to post, or at least give us the information about that last interview with Lottery Dreams. And I'm just going to read this email, or at least part of this email. You all are discussing the reflecting like a state of gold, quote unquote, nugget. I have a thought. Seth Gold sounds a lot like Seth Gold. Those are spelled Gould or Gold.
But I think his name is pronounced Gould.
Right. So JCB even mispronounced it as gold and then corrected himself in one of his interviews. So she was thinking the exact same thing as you, Bryn. I didn't think too much about this until JCB's most recent interview with Timothy Schultz. So that's the Lottery Dreams interview. He went out of his way to say that Seth lived in North Carolina when he started the boxes. And that's also mentioned in the book that Seth is from North Carolina. That's my interjection there. But has since moved back to the Northeast to be closer to family, which he mentions in the interview. It seemed like a strange thing to add into the interview. Seth's state of residency didn't seem to be important to the interview at all. JCB's behavior before saying it was odd too. He took his glasses off and wiped them. So we got a little profiling going on here, a little lie detector. Nervous. Like he was planning to say that. Almost like a poker tell. He also pauses between saying Seth and gold, like he is trying to think of how to pronounce it. Give it a watch and let me know what you think. I'm starting to wonder if the state of gold could be North Carolina. And it's around the 13 minutes and 40 seconds mark of that Lottery Dreams interview. Thoughts?
Well, so I mean, to clarify, so in the interview he says Seth Gold, and then he meant to say Gould, which I think is just, I mean, it's easy to say gold by accident when you're talking about treasures. And then I think he talks about North Carolina. To him, that's probably like something that really resonated with him and his connection with Seth because they were both from there. So I think just in him kind of speaking to Seth as a person, that logically made sense for him to include that information, is my interpretation.
How do you explain away the glasses wipe, Bryn? No, I think it's a good take. I think it's really cool to see people paying so much attention to detail and stuff like that. And I like the idea behind it. The first thing that comes to mind for me is, and this is something that I looked into a bunch of JCB's other interviews before doing our interview for a number of different reasons. And one of the things, I can't remember where I heard it, but one of the takeaways that I had was that, Forrest Fenn used to do a lot of like being kind of coy and dropping little hints and kind of wanted to be a public figure. And my understanding is that JCB specifically didn't want to be like dropping little hints in interviews. Interviews are not for hints. That was my understanding. Of course, This is starting to feel very redundant, but everything's open to interpretation. Even things that seem very black and white, you reread the thing, you reread the statement 20 times, and all of a sudden it starts feeling like there's opportunity to take it a different way. But that was my understanding, is that he doesn't want to do like the coy little dropping secret hints in interviews. And I have to imagine that would be a very difficult thing to do too, because a lot of these are recorded live. And, if you wanted to like drop a hint that involves enunciating something a certain way, you only get one shot at it. He's not the one recording the interview.
Yeah, I think the pronunciation is less interesting to me, more so than that he specifically mentioned that Seth Gold was from North Carolina when he started building the boxes and has since moved, such as you're thinking about if you looked up Seth Gold today, figured out where he was, he's in the Northeast. So anyway, yeah. I kind of like that. I kind of like that take, but everybody can interpret it their own way. That might be a nothing burger, but I liked this email a lot. So thank you, Sandy.
Yeah, I like that part too. Oh, I agree with you.
All right, another email here from Ruth. Ruth had some information about Amelia Earhart based on some books she has read on that subject. Earhart flew from Trepassy, a tiny harbor close to the Labrador Sea near the Arctic Circle. I don't quite know how to interpret this, but I'll just read it. I seriously love to read, so when I bought the fake book and didn't get any clues, I read the Earhart biography. So I don't know if she got tricked like I did with the fake Treasure Inside book. She was a fascinating woman. The big deal about this is that the Nuestra Senora de la Luz was in such a similar situation in a different part of the world. Both of these locations, so that was about the sunken ship that had all the gold in it. Both of these locations had so many deaths in the name of furthering an ideal. On page 106, the second paragraph says, the waters of the Rio de la Plata are one of the deadliest shipwreck graveyards in the world. In the Earhart biography and everywhere else that early aviation history is discussed, the bay at Trepassy is described in the same terms. Earhart and her crew stayed for maybe 3 weeks waiting for the weather to break so they could fly out. Some days they would try to leave but end up dumping gas and still be unable to get off the water since they were in a seaplane with floats. And even Charles Lindbergh stopped in Trepassy to wait until a ship out at sea sitting there using Morse code to transmit the weather forecast about whether or not it would be safe to fly to Europe. So I like that Morse code connection because, as we mentioned with the Carnegie chapter, he talked about telegraph, but he did not mention Morse code there specifically either. The big deal about Earhart flying from, was it Mexico to New Jersey? Yes. I can't recall. Is that there weren't airports with gasoline around. She had to carry the fuel inside her plane. 700 to 900 gallons. So a lot of fun facts about Amelia Earhart that Ruth provides based on the biography that she read. And so, I don't know. I liked the connection there between Trepassy and Rio de la Plata as both being like very treacherous areas regarding exploration and discovery, even though that wasn't mentioned by JCB specifically in the Amelia Earhart section. So thinking about, his quote that he might have meant people to do a little bit of extra research that could go into there. Not really, I don't know, from this email, not too much in terms of clues, I would say. I just thought it was some interesting information about Amelia Earhart. And then we have a related email from Margie. She said that there is an Earhart crater on the moon, which is interesting because I was looking at a map of the moon just a couple days ago after our moon rock episode. particularly because that was the one that talked about Cardinal, and thinking about maybe there's some geographical locations on the moon that might connect back to certain keywords in the text. I wasn't able to find any. I also didn't find that there was an Earhart crater in my research, so thank you to Margie for pointing that out. I thought that was quite interesting. Let's see. We also have an email from Scott, our official fact checker, unofficial fact checker for the Unofficial podcast. Because he sent so much information in, we have a new sound clip for Scott.
Scott's fact checking complete.
He's our fact checker.
Oh my gosh, I love it. We keep saying we need to have like a little, in the election when they have like the fact checker live in the corner. We need that for like Scott. Oh my gosh, I did not see that coming.
So what
Scott's
is
fact checking complete?
Scott has two really good nuggets for us here. The first was about the torn out pages. So he has successfully found some Shutterstock images. I'll pull a couple examples up. Shutterstock images of the images in the book that look like they're torn out pages, and has found those examples on Shutterstock.
So I want to clarify for people that are only listening.
Yeah.
That's like the images in the book that have like a full half page tear or full page.
Right.
Not the cutout borders on some of the images.
Not the photography cutouts. We have not identified those yet. But yes, the full page tears, I think, have been identified at this point. So here's one example. And then I'll pull up another one as well. Here.
And so, I will say I'm happy to see these go because it eliminates one tear variable that I have to work through.
So if anyone else has identified the photography, like the photograph tearouts for contained images within the text, we're still on the lookout for those. The other nugget, well, sorry, do you have additional comments on that?
That red part. What's going on with that?
So that was looking like it might have been edited. So that was also of interest to me.
Well, yeah. I mean, if everything's Shutterstock and then he specifically altered a part of it, seems like that would be very interesting, right?
That may be
I think
true.
he was saying, and I guess I haven't looked specifically enough at these pictures, but he was saying some of the border images were like stretched or compressed to fit within the half page. But yeah, so here that would just be a different section entirely. Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have
I don't know.
a third one as well. So this is basically Scott showing us the consistency of a lot of these patterns across pages as well. So partially solved, I would say. But yeah, Cody brings up a good point that maybe these altered ones might have some meaning.
Yeah, we'll have to revisit that one. That's I guess I didn't look closely enough at that one specifically. So
I think in a follow-up email, and I didn't pull it up, I think Scott had mentioned some of the vertical tears on some of the AI images. He was also able to find those as well as a follow-up. So most of those seem to be consistent, I guess, at this point. And yeah, I guess more investigation to do with the edited ones, but we'll take a closer look at that. And then also in Scott's follow-up email, he gave us some information about the foot lockers or the gym lockers. I don't know if you guys saw that, but let me pull up an image. Let's see. Scott says, also regarding the gym lockers thing from the last episode, as we were debating why people were using gym lockers as a unit of measure, it seems to be a go-to analogy for auction houses. Bizarre, but not a JCB-ism. Though technically they use foot lockers instead of gym lockers. So here's an example of a moon rock that was up for auction. And you can see in the description at the bottom, all what they're talking about, less than 600 kilograms of lunar meteorites are known to exist, and all would fit within 4 footlockers. And a significant portion is controlled by governmental institutions. And he gave us 3 links that had that particular verbiage associated with it. So I think it makes sense if Jon was in the market for buying moon rocks, he just snagged that factoid straight from the auction houses. Where that came from beforehand, I'm guessing is like, I don't know, maybe NASA has said that or something like that. And the auction houses have just taken that and now copy pasted it into all their listings. But it doesn't seem like JCB conceptualized that unit of measure himself, which is, I think, very helpful for that particular nugget.
Yeah, that is good. And I think maybe changing foot locker to gym locker could have just been like a easier to wrap your head around as just like a casual reader of the book versus maybe like the nitty gritty of trying to buy something through an auction house.
Right.
I could see if we saw foot locker in the book, it'd be even more awkward than a gym locker. So yeah, odd regardless.
But I think I can rest easy now, not having to worry about what the meaning of that is. So thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Should we dive into Discord detectives? Maybe. I don't have my sound effect. It's broken.
Oh no.
You just have to go.
It's okay. And maybe it works out well because I'm actually going to combine Discord Detective and Coincidence of the Day into one here. I think it should be pretty quick. So I was sleuthing through some Pokemon box Discord chatter. I've been lurking a lot recently. And I know we had talked about how we thought like the connection between the Jayco camper, the hard case Samsonite. Oh my gosh, why can't I think of the third thing right now?
The hatchback.
What was the other? Sorry, yeah, the hatchback. How those were all like hard cased things that opened up, and someone had kind of said like, oh, that like open up like a clamshell. And so then in Discord, someone was talking about, oh, maybe it's an egg and like where Pokemon spawn. And then someone else just followed up with a Pokeball. And it's like, oh, well, now that also just like feels pretty obvious, and like that should be what we're looking into here. And so all this to be said, I've just been doing some high level research. I have not taken like a super deep dive into Pokeballs, and I'm not a Pokemon expert. So hopefully everything I'm saying here checks out. I don't know. Scott might have a heyday with my Pokemon knowledge, but
Or
this
Cody.
is or Cody, yeah. I watched it was like a 30-something minute YouTube video on Pokeballs. So I just wanted to get like a base understanding of Pokeballs and maybe kind of get an idea of how they could be applying potentially to a solve here, or just how we're supposed to be interpreting Pokeballs if that's what this is indicating. 2 things. So I guess this video I watched walk through all the Pokeballs through each generation of Pokemon. So I've seen them all with my eyes. There was a couple that stood out, and I will say they both stood out early on in Generation 2 Pokeballs. And so I guess I'll first say like my initial reaction then is like, well, does that have something to do with the Froakie's hands? With 3 and 2, like is he indicating that maybe at a higher level we're supposed to just be doing something with like 2nd and 3rd generation Pokemon? That again, I don't know enough about Pokemon to understand the differentiation and all of that yet. But I have a few images of things that I found super interesting as far as the Pokeballs go. So Blake, if you could pull up the Park Ball.
Park Ball.
And this specific Park Ball is unique to the 2nd generation. So what stood out to me with this one is the Park Ball allows players to catch wild monsters in the bug catching contest. So I was unaware of the bug catching contest as a part of the Pokemon games. But that stood out to me because we have all the bugs discussed in the chapter. I know he talked about the creator of Pokemon being called Mr. Bug. And so it just seemed really interesting that we have, this specific ball that would be used in a bug catching contest in the game. And then according to this source as well on the screen, it says that a special Pokeball that is only used in the Great Marsh. So Great Marsh also kind of raised a flag for me because I think it's when you're visualizing this chapter, I think you can certainly kind of visualize a swampy scene at some point with some of the Pokemon that are mentioned. So I think between all three of these things, it seemed interesting. And I'm going to start looping in some of my coincidences of the day here. So first coincidence, this is not as good as my second, but these two little dots that you see on like the upper part of the Pokeball, I was like, that kind of reminds me of the Greninja's eyes. So I certainly don't think that there's anything to that, but it stood out to me. Just similar shape in the red, I guess. I don't know what those two little, maybe they're supposed to be eyes. Maybe this is Pokeball is supposed to look like a bug. I don't know. So that was my first coincidence. And then if you want to jump to the level ball, that would be wonderful. So the level ball was also introduced in the second generation as well. And I think I actually gasped when this Pokeball came on the screen. I paused and told Cody to come look because we have the Greninja image, which I guess if you maybe now want to pull up the Greninja image, like this V on the Pokeball, I felt like looked exactly like that red V that we have on the Greninja's chest in the image in the book. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Yeah. I actually did. I'm even wearing red tonight. I didn't plan that. Wow. So there, now you can see the Greninja eyes too.
Yeah,
which,
that's a good point.
I mean, I do think both are just, I mean, there's so many other Pokeballs. I've learned that much from this video that I watched today. But it does seem like the V specifically, I don't know if this is calling out something with the level ball. The Pokeball itself works. It's like you can catch more Pokemon if you're a higher level in the game. So at first I thought maybe it has something to do with kind of like the evolution of the Pokemon themselves, which would maybe play in more with the chapter contents of like elders and the evolutions of the Pokemon, but it seems like it's more tied to just like you as a player and your level. So I don't know. I do think it is just a coincidence. But I don't know, the proportions of the V and everything just felt very reminiscent of the Greninja itself. So those are my two coincidences of the day and Discord detective of these hard cases opening potentially being Pokeballs.
Yeah, I like that connection a lot. I still very much like the hard shell connection at the beginning with the golem at the end, which kind of has like a turtle shell on it too. I don't know. Do you have thoughts on that, Cody?
I like both.
I'm gonna bolster. Yeah, go ahead.
I think. Sorry, I was just I think the hard shell thing felt very obvious once it was pointed out to me. I like the potential ties with the Pokeball, and I like the potential ties with the Golem. I like both of those. One thing I wanted to clarify on that, what's it called? The level ball? So you'd have, when you're going to catch a Pokemon, at least in the game, you'd have your Pokemon out battling another Pokemon. And during that battle, you'd attempt to catch that wild Pokemon. So the level difference they're referencing is the level difference between the Pokemon that you currently have out and the wild Pokemon. It's not the level of like the character.
Okay.
So if you're trying to like make it analogous with the story, it would be like what level your Froakie is that he's with versus any other wild Pokemon, not what level JCB is, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I don't know how that ties in any better. Just wanted to kind of clarify that.
No, that makes
Yeah, I
sense.
mean, maybe potentially something there with not training Froakie to evolve. But so evolution though isn't tied to level, correct? Is that what you're saying?
It can be most. I'd say most of the time it is. Um, there's a number of different ways that Pokemon can evolve. A lot of it is by leveling up.
Yeah, I think for the
Okay.
Froakie example, it's like once Froakie hits level 17, then he evolves to Frogadier, something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I do. I
I
think
think
there's a
this
coincidence,
is
but I'm hoping by putting it out there, maybe someone has, uh, I don't know, some sort of nugget they can respond with that has more of Pokemon knowledge than I do. But I'm planning on taking more of a deep dive into Pokemon myself. So I'm not trying to just get the easy way out here.
No, the V on the
I'm
ball and
learning.
the
I'm
V on the
learning.
Greninja. I think to me that's probably my favorite. My favorite of the things that you're talking about here. That seems
yeah.
like it lines up well. I know that people have been interested in what, if anything, that V on the Greninja is there for.
Yeah, I like the hard shell connection that opens like a clam. Like that is spot on.
Hmm.
I like that a lot. I'm gonna bolster it a little bit just because I don't think I've talked about it yet on the podcast, but making to the connection of why that Fabergé frog is there as well. He specifically calls out that Fabergé frog as being a Netsuke, right? Which is like this little animal at the top of an in-row box that can, acts as like you can see this little bead that can open and close, but it basically stops that bead from going off the string. And so when I looked into the Netsuke, then it drew me to this in-row box where the Netsuke is specifically involved. And this also to me is a hard shell thing that opens and closes and stores, little knickknacks as being a connection, a proxy to a Pokeball as well. So,
Hmm.
I like
trying
that
to
a
put
lot.
together why the Netsuke is specifically chosen and described in the Pokemon chapter, this seems to be a connection to me. Um, what to make of it, though, I don't know, other than it bolsters your Pokeball theory, Bryn. Um, but why? But why the Pokeball? What makes the Pokeball important if it is important? How do we turn that into a clue? I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, I will say, I've just been like making so many crazy notes today. But I feel like the Pokeballs can really direct you towards regions of the game or like where they're used in like geographical ways.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know. I guess I can't wrap my head around all the different worlds within the different Pokemon games, and I think it's because I can't understand or don't have a good grasp on all the different versions of the Pokemon video games. So I think there's so many different worlds, and there's like these safari zones and like these national parks within the game. So I think I just need to like better understand the geography within each specific game. And I do think if there is a Pokeball connection, I do think we could be using that to maybe tie to like geographical regions within the game and try to find some connections with the Pokemon that are mentioned in the box with crossover. I know yeah, I don't know. I'm speaking to things I don't understand myself, so I won't spam you all.
No, but I think that the evidence pointing to the bug specific ball, I thought that was quite interesting, just because you're absolutely right that it was a bunch of insect-like Pokemon mentioned in a row. So
Mm-hmm.
and it relates to a marsh, which makes sense. So, all right, should we dive into our chapter content for today? We are going to be talking about chapter 20 of There's Treasure Inside by Jon Collins-Black. The 6-figure birthstone. Choosing a new perspective is the subtext for this, and we have 2 quotes associated with this chapter. Instead of complaining that the rose bush is full of thorns, be grateful the thorn bush has roses. Perspective from Lecrae. Who knows who Lecrae is?
A musical artist, a rapper.
Yes.
Is
Hip-hop
he
artist.
was it Christian
Christian
rapper?
hip-hop
Okay.
artist, yes. Yes. And I could not find like this lyric necessarily. I just found one single post on his Facebook page where he makes this quote. So I don't know if it's part of a song or just JCB swiped that from Lecrae's Facebook page or not. And then a second quote, where you stand determines what you see and what you do not see. It determines also the angle you see it from. A change in where you stand changes everything. Steve DeShazer. Who knows who Steve DeShazer is?
I just wrote the note, solution-focused therapy.
He is a psychotherapist, author, and developer and pioneer of solution-focused brief therapy, which is like therapy that focuses on the goals, your goals for the present and future, without focusing so much on your past.
Yeah, I thought this quote was pretty interesting and maybe telling us some instructions here. Where you stand determines what you see and what you do not see. It determines also the angle you see it from. A change is where you stand. A change in where you stand changes everything. So I think we've been bantering a little bit back and forth about perspective, obviously in the last chapter when we had the segue here. But yeah, this seems more explicit, I would say, than that in terms of being in a physical location and trying to find a perspective somewhere. Maybe boots on the ground. So, all right, should we dive right in to the chapter summary? Jon Collins-Black talks about blueprinting the treasure hunt and having all of the pieces of the treasure. That all of the pieces of the treasure have an attribute that is personal to Jon Collins-Black. He considered thousands of items for this treasure hunt, but all the items he ended up selecting had purpose and intent associated with them. And then he describes 2 pieces of the treasure which met the criteria, but then he dismissed them due to old perspectives. So when he started talking about perspectives in the last chapter, he said he has 2 examples of that, and that's what we're going to learn about today in today's chapter. He returns to the chapter 4 story about him digging in the empty lot by his house, looking for crystals, and ending up finding just small pieces of smoky quartz. Jon Collins-Black looked at some smoky quartz and decided he didn't want them because it kind of brought back memories of maybe disappointment that that's all he was finding when he was doing his expeditions as a young child. Then he was browsing through a gem collection in a private collection and found a really nice specimen that caught his eye as quite beautiful. And that was before he knew it was a smoky quartz when he looked at the description. And so that's kind of what changed his perspective, is without being biased that he knew it was a smoky quartz ahead of time, he thought it was beautiful, and then that changed his perspective on smoky quartz. So that is, I think, the beyond brilliant smoky quartz that we see on the title page of this chapter. So that was one example of something he was purposely avoiding for the treasure because of the memories or the feelings it brought to him as being disappointing. changed his perspective on seeing something without that bias built in ahead of time. He reevaluated his biases and was dismissing certain items because he was afraid some items might make him seem boring to the reader. And I think that was an association to the smoky quartz initially. His second shift was the bias against garnet. Because it was present, as pointed out, I believe, by his father in the asphalt around his house. He could see some small flecks of red garnet in the asphalt. And so he always associated that with kind of asphalt, not a precious gem. And the other thing associated with garnet was that was his birthstone. So he was super disappointed in garnet. All of the other birthstones of his family members and friends were like emerald, amethyst, aquamarine, which he says were all better than pavement. So he initially didn't have any desire to get a garnet into the treasure. But because of his previous experience, he was going to try to get around this bias and started researching garnet for the first time in his life. And he learned when researching about garnet, or garnet, I don't know actually how to say that. He learned about the green Savarite garnet, which is from Tanzania. And there's a legend associated with the Savarite discovery in that a guy named Campbell Bridges discovered it when he dove into a ditch to avoid a charging buffalo in Tanzania. When he dove into the ditch and then looked up, he saw some green shimmer in the outcropping of a rock into the ditch or the ravine that he dove into. He was like immediately transferred for work away from that area and then came back. I don't know if it was years later. It wasn't quite clear, but he spent 7 years looking for that green shimmer again and eventually found it after a 7-year period. And Tanzania is still the only place that has this green Savarite garnet. Then we get a couple of callbacks. One is to Tiffany and Company being the first jewelry designers to actually use this green Savarite in some of their designs. And then a callback to the Chivor Emerald as well because of the green color. So Jon Collins-Black says these two stories illustrate how perspective matters and that we can change perspectives if desired. Talks about perspective further as a powerful tool and a skill that should be practiced. He describes walking by a rose garden at a local park and compares a variety of people and their perspectives to a variety of roses in terms of form, flower, color, a lushness of the bushes as all being characteristics of different types of roses, and connects that to different characteristics of people. All the variety of roses are quite different, but they all shine in the sun. And then we get a, let's say, expanded reality story about an upset rose that starts talking to him. And I don't know if we want to talk about that further, but that's the end of my notes. That's the end of the chapter. Comments?
Yeah. Well, first of all I can think of is Kevin Garnett. But yeah, this chapter, I guess, felt significant. I don't know if it's just because we're now like in the 20s, as far as like chapter count goes, and we know it's kind of coming up to the end, but it almost feels like it is trying to start to pull some things together and maybe direct us to, give us directions to maybe a second pass through the book. So it just felt like it had weight to it as far as like what we're supposed to be doing to interpret the book as a whole. And this, the Rose story, very odd. The first of its kind in the book.
Right. I didn't quite know what to make of that as well. But it was interesting in the placement that we get this kind of imaginary story from a rose that starts talking to him.
Normally we've said it's been funny how when one of us feels like it's a light chapter, the other one feels like it's a heavy chapter, and vice versa. And I think on this one, we're all unanimous. I also have a lot of notes on this one.
Yeah, I've got a few nuggets for sure. Yeah, I didn't think this one was too light.
Yeah.
Do we want to dive right into nuggets then? Start our discussion?
I think we should.
All right.
Yeah.
Bryn, do you want to go first?
Sure. So my nugget kind of, I guess, encompasses a few things here. Just, I guess, starting around the rose theme that we have here in the chapter. So obviously that Lecrae quote kicks off the idea of the perspective of the roses, and then there's quite a few like French words in this chapter as well. And so, oh my gosh, I do not speak French. I apologize. So like fait accompli was French, blasé, malcontent. And then there was also the quote, those feelings rose to the surface. And then obviously the story of the roses itself. So, I mean, I think all of this is to give the idea. I think it's all kind of building off of the quote in a way, like it's the perspective of the rose. It's playing off of that, I think. And who knows which direction that went. Like if this was already kind of a theme and then he sought after this quote so specifically, like you're saying, it's not like it's something that was that common or easy to find. So I guess with the French words, I think this is maybe a stretch, but it made me think, if we're talking about perspective, the phrase la vie en rose in French, so life in pink, which is kind of another way of saying like viewing life through rose-colored lenses, rose-colored glasses, whatever the saying is obviously speaking to you choosing your perspective in a certain way. So I don't know. I guess I don't quite know what to make of that. And it's not obviously not a full fleshed out thought, but I also thought then it was interesting, like if we're to think of it's literally like life in pink in French. The picture that he chose to include on page 173, the Ocampo image, which is an actual piece of art that he has licensed for this book. So that is the second time that we've now seen like we can assume he had to use like legally obtain rights to use the Olympic rings. This, I guess I shouldn't say for sure. This is only the second time that I'm remembering where this is not an AI image. This is an actual piece of art. So there was something significant enough about this. I mean, obviously we get like an optical illusion out of it, which makes sense that it's floral, so it works. But there was some reason why he wanted to use this photo other than creating some sort of other perspective optical illusion in AI or some other means of creating artwork for this book. And it's a pink image. Flowers are pink, the background's pink. So I don't know. Like I said, I don't quite know how to tie it all together, but the French connection, the roses, it all feels very intertwined.
Where did
know.
it say rise to the surface? I don't think I caught that.
Those feelings rose to the surface. I don't have a page number on that.
Rose to the surface. I see. Because it says rose.
Right.
I did not pick up on that. Nice.
Sorry, I should have written down a page number.
No, that's all right. I understand why you picked it out. Because you were talking about French stuff and then the rose connection. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, all of it to be said, it might just be kind of him wanting to talk about the beauty of roses contrast to the thorns and that, just kind of being an intentional contrast. But Yeah, I just felt like there's obviously a connection to French components here as well.
Yeah, I picked up on the blasé. I didn't pick up on a lot of the other French connections there, so that's actually super helpful. I just as a follow-on thought blasé could equal blaze, since we've seen blaze in the Forrest Fenn poem, and it's commonly used for the blazes on trail markers, or blazes as trail markers. So I was wondering if there's a connection there, but it's probably a pretty rough connection because I didn't see any keywords around that really.
That's a good thought, though. Someone, I'm trying to remember the actual count. Someone did a find in the book of how many times blaze was used, and it was a surprising amount.
Oh, really? Well, yeah, I
I want to say
guess. Yeah.
8. I could be thinking of the wrong word, but
Okay.
it was a surprising amount of times that blaze was used.
I was just furiously Googling real quick because I think I did that thing again by accident where I heard about something a while ago and then it just is common knowledge in my head. And then now that you brought up this Octavio Campo painting, I'm assuming it's a painting.
Yeah, I think so.
Reminded me. So there's a second painting he did that goes with this image. Do either one of you already have it written down, like know more about it than me?
No,
I think I've seen it. Yeah.
Okay. It looks like it's called Family of Birds. And it's a similar thing where it's 3 birds that are the eyes, or one eye, nose, and mouth up against a tree. That's like the outline of the face. So interesting. I don't know. Maybe interesting that he didn't include that or didn't reference that there's another one there. I'm also not really sure what the artist's intent was there, if they were like released together or if they just happen to be kind of two different two different paintings that are similar ideas. But I just remember seeing that like months ago, finally going to be in the back of my mind when I saw this again, reading through the chapter. I didn't write it down because it's just been in the back of my mind for so long, so I should probably bring that up.
Yeah, that is a good point.
Bryn stole a lot of my idea for my FFPN. Kind of took it further. I was just looking at ties to France, and French stuff. So I also had, oh gosh, Fiat accompli, and Blasé. The other one I had was the Lecrae rapper. The like one of the first few sentences on his Wikipedia page is that he had 3 studio albums as a member of the hip hop group 116 Click, with click being CLIQUE, like a click, which is also a French term.
Okay.
So I thought it was definitely a noticeable amount of French terms and ties to French terms in this chapter, which is funny because it's not even like a chapter about something inherently French, right? So that's basically as far as I took the idea. Bryn seemed to have taken it further somehow.
Nice. I win nuggets.
You haven't heard my nugget yet. Blasé doesn't count for me. Yeah, honestly, I didn't pick up on the French stuff at all, so I appreciate you guys pointing that out. I didn't realize there were so many references.
It's because you're not as cultured as us drinking tea.
And I'm not a linguist like Cody. All right. I'm trying to choose between 2. I'll just say my more outlandish one, I guess. Seattle solved. Bridges could never shake the image of that shimmering green stone from his mind. That's my Forrest Fenn Picked Nugget. It's talking about Campbell Bridges when he saw the shimmering green thing in the cliff wall. But Bridges could never shake. There's a very famous Tacoma Narrows Bridge, actually, in Washington. The Galloping Gertie I don't know if you've seen a video of that or film, I guess, because it's old footage of Galloping Gertie, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, as it gets like resonating in the wind, like violently shaking. So when I saw bridges could never shake, that just like immediately popped into my head as a shaking bridge. And because it says could never shake the image of that shimmering green stone from his mind, Seattle is the Emerald City, right? So that connection between the Tacoma Narrows Bridge and Seattle, I feel like could be a clue.
Buy your plane tickets.
And now I like a Seattle solve because other people have mentioned, you know, the Olympics as a big theme, obviously in the book, and the Olympic Peninsula as a potential solve site too. So is this confirmation bias towards that? Certainly. But I thought it was quite interesting that he used the verbiage that he did there in one sentence to connect potentially the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, which is a very famous shaking bridge, to the green stone, an emerald. So that's my Forrest Fenn Picked Nugget, which
I like
That's
that.
good.
It's not. I wouldn't
You
call
win.
that like outlandish.
okay.
I
No.
think that it's, you know, we talk so much about not knowing how to calibrate. Are we looking at like more surface level stuff or like really deep references? You just
Right.
have no idea at this point. I think if it is a deep references in every chapter, that, I mean, that could certainly be it in my mind. I'll tell you, if that's it in this chapter, we got a lot of research to do in 22 other chapters.
Right. Keep
But
in
I do
mind
like that connection a lot.
Yeah, keep in mind, you know, Jon Collins-Black says you don't have to find all of the clues to get a solve, right? So this could be a deep cut.
That'd be a deep cut.
But it definitely pinged my spidey sense, quote unquote. So,
And I can tell you, as Washington State residents, is there's some excellent trails out here. Excellent trails, good amount of cover,
Solved.
a lot of evergreen stuff, right? So it's not
Yeah.
like all of a sudden the ground's just bare,
right.
seasonally, where the
Well-
box is just going to be shining in the sun. Yeah, I hope there's one in Washington. That'd be great. Save on some airfare.
Yeah, I'll buy my tickets. You fill up the gas tank.
Since we're talking about Seattle area, then I will throw in a bonus mailbag here. Margie also wrote in and let us know that the Seattle World's Fair theme was space, hence the Space Needle. So maybe all of our celestial themes tie in. Oh, it's all checking out.
Yeah, I mean, going on top of that, if we're thinking about a woven theme, a cloth theme, a fabric theme,
Yeah.
and a space needle that connects kind of our celestial and
Oh my god.
I guess we're not publishing this episode. It's too good.
Cut us off.
so Space Needle seems like it connects two of the main themes of the book, right? Celestial and the sewing, the thread, our unbreakable thread theme. You know, I've seen chatter about Washington State based solves. I think for the past and future box and maybe for the lion's share as well. So I don't know.
No,
I like a lot of
what you're saying.
High level ideas are connecting that here. So
My only concern would be how not centralized it would be for a lion's share box. It'd be very, very off center.
yeah, that's true. Yep, I think that's definitely a strike against it, that it's not accessible to very many people if it's in the Pacific Northwest. But if all the other boxes are accessible, maybe it doesn't matter which one where the lion's share is. So anyway, lots of food for thought there.
Yeah, when we look at the that map that we made of the 3 part 2 boxes that we do have specific locations for, it was all central US and East Coast. So could be that all the part 2s are east and the lion shares right here at home.
Yep.
Wow.
Lucky.
I cannot get over that Space Needle.
That's pretty good.
It's hilarious. It is good.
And that would match the World's Fair theme because the Space Needle was built for the World's Fair, as you mentioned. So
We'd have to go
Mhm.
back and rewatch our podcast and pick up on who first mentioned quilting theme. I can't
Mm,
remember which of us three mentioned quilting theme first.
I don't. It's not a quilt. It's a fabric, weaving together threads.
sewing,
You were
cloth,
saying Margaret Washington. Is that
Martha.
her?
Margaret
Margaret
Washington.
Martha Washington was quilting in a fair or something. That was your, yeah.
I think she's well known for being a quilter, right? And she,
I had
who
multiple
sewed
quilting references.
who sewed the first American flag? Wasn't that Martha Washington, or maybe I have that wrong?
I didn't think so. I
I'll
thought
look
it
it
was
up.
I
someone
have
else.
no idea.
Betsy Ross, right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay. Uh, who's got some flakes for us? Unless you want to keep discussing Seattle, the Seattle solve.
I like the Seattle Solve.
Me too.
Um,
I've got, let me do another one that I actually had as FFPN number 2.
Okay.
This is just basically, this is actually not like a direct quote, but kind of more of an idea of the chapter, beyond the perspective stuff, which is the idea of dismissing something common or not giving it its a proper appreciation just because it's abundant, right? So he talks about both of those gems, the smoky quartz. I mean, he didn't like it because as a kid it was just kind of all over the place. And then same thing with the garnet, that it's just, all over in the pavement. I think that's really analogous with something that we've been saying the past couple episodes, really trying to draw attention to not trying not to just like skim over stuff that's so obvious because we're just like, oh, we're all thinking this, so we're not even going to say it. The big one that comes to mind again for me is the whole the abundance of the references to joy, like tying everything to joy. I feel like the word joy is in every chapter multiple times.
Mhm.
And in my mind specifically, I like the whole personification of joy, where he's talking about joy like it's a person or a thing, like a physical thing. Um, so I thought that this some of the kind of the lesson or the overarching theme of this chapter really plays into the idea of that, of not, yes, the joy thing is all throughout the book and it just kind of feels like background knowledge at this point. But I think if we took this chapter as instruction, it would be like him saying, hey, yes, this is all over the place, but it's still just as valuable a clue as some of these other deep cuts.
Mm-hmm. You're our joy. Yeah, advocate, main joy advocate.
You could have just left it at I'm your joy.
Yeah, you're my joy. So sorry, go back to what is the FFPN then? Was it a specific quote or just the concept again?
Just the concept of dismissing something because it's common or not giving it the value it deserves because it's common, because it just seems so analogous to me to the billions of references to joy in the book and how it's one of the most abundant references, and I feel like we go episodes at a time without ever referencing it just because it feels like we're all just kind of acknowledge it without saying it, that oh yeah, the joy stuff's in there too.
I like that.
Yeah, I do too.
It feels appropriate, like for that connection to be reiterated or made at this point, kind of as like we said, it kind of feels like he's trying to wrap some things up. Maybe that's not the right way of putting it, but kind of re-emphasize some things. So I do like that.
And with the 2 callbacks, as I mentioned in the summary, to the Chivalry Emerald and Chapter 4 digging in the open lot that you used to go to. That was
yeah,
bolsters that a little bit. Do you have another nugget or flake, Bryn?
I do. So I thought it was really interesting that when he was talking about the birthstones, like the way that he was calling out, like so and so had this, my friend had that, kind of listing out all these different birthstones that the other people had versus him, which immediately took me to the quote that was about like remembering someone's birthday earlier on in the book. And then I got to thinking, okay, well, the Hopi calendar, and we all agree that we think the Hopi calendar is very significant. And then I was thinking, well, do these months match up with the underlined and overlined letters? Because I haven't really seen those used in any certain way. And I don't want to let that kind of slide because I think there's something to those too. So I've looked up all the birthstones mentioned, translated those back to the months, went back to the Hopi calendar, looked at the months to see if it lined up. All this to be said, this is a big letdown. This is the horseshoes and hand grenades within the chapters. They did not, at first it kind of started and I got really excited and then it was a dead end. But I do think that there is maybe a larger connection to this kind of birthday call out that I think we've seen a few times in the book.
Yeah.
At least a couple. So it just seemed like he was putting a lot of emphasis on highlighting these other birthdays. Granted, they're not specific dates or anything like that, but to be calling out the months, maybe there's something to it.
Like that a lot. I did not make that connection. Excellent. Yeah, the whole chapter is about Birthstone, right? The 6-figure Birthstone.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I did not think about that. Remembering somebody's birthday connection there. I like that a lot. I'll pick out an obvious nugget / flake. I was clinging to some old perspectives as ferociously as if I were a lion atop a mountain of decaying catnip. That's an interesting analogy.
Yeah,
And I don't know I don't know what to do with that. Not one I've ever thought of before. Why is the catnip decaying? Why is it a lion? And how does that...
So
Go ahead, Bryn.
I will say from the very beginning, when he first introduces the largest box as the lion's share, Cody, I feel like Cody's very opposed to this idea, but I'm like, why is nobody discussing why the lion's share? Why is he referring to it as the lion's share? Like, yes, I understand that works for what it is, but it seems odd to me that he would be so intentional about all these different components of the book. All the part 2 boxes have their names and it ties in with the clues and how the box is solved. And then we just have the largest box of all that he's going to call the lion's share, and we're not considering why it's called the lion's share. That is driving me crazy. And so I guess I've been looking throughout the whole book for connections in my mind to, like, where does this lion come in? Or how is this going to be an abstract idea that ties into a lion? And this was the first time that I think I've seen lion called out in the book. So it popped out to me. Well, obviously because it's weird how he wrote it, but mostly I was like, ooh, finally we get a lion reference. So I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really necessarily provide any additional context for the lion's share title of the largest box, but
does anybody know what
that's all.
Catnip is? Is it a plant?
No, it's like cat food. It's like a dog treat, but for cats, where it's like
But it
specifically formulated to like drive them nuts, and they love it.
Right.
But doesn't it originate from a plant? Like there's a drug in it, right?
Also known as cat mint or catwort, is a leafy green herb in the mint family that contains the chemical nepetalactone. So I'm wondering if that's actually a hint that if we find a mountain that has this plant natively, that this is actually a clue to where the lion's share is. So I'll have to do a little bit of legwork on, or just Scott.
Right, because if it's lion's share and lion is atop this mountain, like it would be beyond aesthetic to find the lion's share.
Hopefully it's in the Olympic Peninsula. I'll do some now.
Yeah.
I do think that the what he's saying does add up as a metaphor at the same time, though, too.
I agree. Yeah.
And I think you said, "Why is the
But-
catnip decaying?"
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's decaying to kind of, it's like symbolic of that what he's guarding or proud of is not valuable. It's bad, biased ideas.
Interesting. Okay.
So when I first read it, and I'm going to say right now that I like both of your takes better than my take on it. But when I first read it, I was trying to find a reason to write it down. And I was like, that metaphor doesn't make sense. And the more I thought about it, I kind of pieced together how the metaphor really kind of does make sense. And I was like, okay, could just be kind of his style, his language style here. But no, I like what you're saying. I really like what Bryn's saying, and I did kind of poo-poo it before a little bit, but hearing it kind of reiterated and said in a slightly different way kind of clicked with me more. That yeah, why, I mean, he could have just as easily have called it the big box or the main box or the just the treasure, and everything else is like sub treasures or whatever, but he chose specifically the lion's share.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, hearing you kind of explain it again, Bryn, I think I wasn't listening well enough the first time, but what you're saying what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Add that to the soundboard, Blake.
I wasn't listening.
Well, to be fair, your work ethic on this treasure is off the charts, or it's hard to keep up with you.
Ooh, also add that. I like all these nice words.
So a little bit of
Um,
more information about catnip. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Some live research.
Yeah, catnip is found in most of North America, from Newfoundland to British Columbia and Canada, and in 48 U.S. states, excluding Florida and Hawaii. Solved.
Really narrowing it down.
Yeah, too bad. Anyway, I'm going to do some more research, but it sounds like it's pretty promiscuous.
Hey, you know it's not in Florida and Hawaii?
Yeah,
Olympic National Park.
that's right. Also, Florida and
Confirmed.
Hawaii not hosted a World's Fair, I don't think. All right.
Oh, interesting.
Who else has some goodies?
I got 4 still.
Okay.
4 flakes.
I've got a couple more too, so go ahead, Cody. Did we skip you,
Okay.
Bryn?
No, I
Cody.
continue.
I picked out each rose radiates life. Every rose is rooted onto Earth's soil while reflecting the divine. I had a sticky note on my desk here from a few chapters ago before even reading this chapter with just the word divine with a bunch of underlines under it.
Mm-hmm.
So some other references in the book real quick. Chapter 21, the experience of seeing someone else as that person truly is one of the greatest joys we will ever divine. Chapter 1, as you encounter stories or ideas you feel you can divine from, write them down. Chapter 6, some people believe inspiration is divine. Chapter 14, as you may know, both men were transcendentalists who believed in the divine spirit of the outdoors. Also, chapter 14, Thoreau believed every human was divine. Now, normally, divine's not like a super uncommon word. You got this whole book, you're talking about lofty subjects and treasury things and some spiritual stuff. So it's not uncommon to have whatever that is, like 8 references to the word divine. But what's particularly why I'm particularly drawn to it and its references is because of the Dust Jacket poem, right?
Hmm.
The be solid, have grit, sparkle even as you pine. Here lies a joy divined.
Mm.
So I've been looking at more of just kind of keeping an eye out for the divine terms. And then also the using divine as a verb, which I had not heard much of in the past. Like the greatest joy you will ever divine, or what was the chapter 1? As you encounter stories or ideas you feel you can divine from. I'd heard of divining rods, and I don't think we need to get into that very most controversial subject in the world. But yeah, the whole divine as a word, and just the references divine. I'm just keeping an eye out for him.
Okay.
Because I'm particularly interested in that dust jacket poem, and what that all is in reference to.
Right. Yeah, that's, I guess each time it's presented itself in the book, it's kind of like piqued my interest, but I have not realized how frequently that was. And I also don't know if I necessarily connected it back to the poem. So I
Right.
think that's really significant.
I agree. I did not remember the poem having that. Thank you, Cody.
Yeah, that's a really good connection.
Bryn.
I guess just to add on to Cody's reflecting the divine, he had also said that the treasures reflect parts of me to you. So just a little add on to the reflection theme there.
Yeah, I think there was a couple references to reflections in this chapter.
Right.
I think that painting and
Oh.
other painting I talked to, I think were also kind of reflections, kind of similar. I don't know. Look into it.
Yeah, I mean that I feel like that would be also another argument for why he felt so strongly that he wanted to use this specific piece of art, because then you would know, well, there is a part two. So then and you'd be able to make the connection that it would be kind of a reflection type relationship between those two pieces.
Maybe
I
a
think
little, sorry to interrupt, maybe a little North Dakota, South Dakota type thing.
solved. The beginning of the chapter, the very first sentence, from the very moment I sat down to blueprint this treasure hunt. I feel like that's a callback to chapter 1 with the roadmap, reiterating, creating the map, creating a plan, and just having like that foundation to work off of before you get wild with everything else. So that felt significant, since we're kind of now in this like wrap up callback phase of the book.
Yeah, that caught my eye. I did not write it down. That's
Really?
yeah, only because I only thought about it because I was rereading chapter 1. So I think I read this and then I reread chapter 1. I was like, oh yeah, the blueprint, but I didn't write it down because I was already finished with the chapter. So
Funny. Oh, what? Yeah, that like really stood out to me.
Yeah,
no, I think
I
it's
was
good.
gonna write it down. I didn't write it down. I did like look it up because it stood out to me, and I was planning on writing it down. And I chalked it up to just like different different terminology. Because I mean, like John's from North Carolina, we're from Washington. I think it might be a more common term to use
A
in the East.
blueprint?
Yeah.
Wait,
Like in this context, this didn't seem like a weird context to use the word blueprint. I feel like I would have said something
No.
different, but I chalked it up to just like different language choice, like the soda cola pop type thing.
I mean, I think it's a very reasonable and normal word to use there, I think. But he also, I think, used it to stand out as like because he wanted it to stand out as a callback.
Yeah, it didn't seem out of place to me. All right. I did have a reflection one, so I'm going to do that quickly. That doesn't count.
Mm-hmm.
The angles at which Mark Oros cut this stone allow a tremendous amount of light to reflect into it. I think that's I don't think that's the caption, but it's in the text, I believe. So that was my other reflection connection there.
Nice. Very good.
The will to shift perspectives. I think we've been trying to figure out that quote in Joy's Serenade, Will's straight edge, which I think, in my opinion, is referencing Occam's razor, which is one of the quotes earlier on in the book from one of the chapter subheadings. But anytime I see will now, I'm trying to see, does that connect back to the Will's straight edge quote in Joy's Serenade? So the will to shift perspectives, just something that stuck out to me. But then will is also mentioned in a number of other chapters, including chapter 1 again, I think. So I need to reevaluate that. But anyway, I just want to point that out.
Will theme.
Will theme, yes.
Another one that stood out right at the beginning, the fabric of which is lined with a wanting I have to connect with you. So now Space Needle theme.
Space Needle theme.
Oh, I did want to call this out. He said every item was ultimately selected with a purpose and intent, which I don't have like a full thought around this yet, but it reminded me of the Wilma chapter where the treasure for that chapter that he mentions is a Olympic gold medal for gymnastics, and she got her medals in track. So he specifically chose a gold medal, and then did he decide, well, now I need to find a story that fits from that Olympics? I don't know. It just seemed like that's kind of the chapter where we have an object and a story that aren't directly correlated. And so I'm just trying to, I guess, wrap my head around that dynamic of that chapter specifically, where, yes, it is a huge and significant story. It makes sense that that would be one that you would highlight from that Olympics. But I just thought it was kind of worth noting where he intentionally selected that gold medal. I don't know if that was around.
My thought on that excerpt was that could he just have meant that, like, could there be a different meaning behind them being selected with an intent other than the intent of directly relating to the chapter? Because I thought that he gathered up a lot of these treasures before he really did the book side of things. So it's not like he's saying, hey, I seeked out these treasures to match what I wrote. So when he's saying he's got them with an intent, the intent could just be, oh, I wanted to find things that have like generally a good story behind them or something, and then tie that all together later.
Right. But then I guess it's kind of interesting then that he tied everything into a story that directly correlated to the object other than that one. And it seemed like maybe then the ones that he didn't tie to a story, I don't want to say dismissed, he put in the other treasure section of the book. Whereas this one, he still felt like he wanted to include the story for whatever reason. Maybe just because it's a wonderful story. But he felt like that was strong enough to pull that medal into the arc of the story versus putting it in with the other treasures.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't have like strong thoughts around it. It just seems kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
But yes, I think he did acquire all of the treasures before he attempted to write the book.
Yeah, that's a good call out. I did not make that connection as being odd, but it's a good point.
And hopefully I'm not just like not thinking of another chapter, right? Or maybe there's like 5 chapters I'm not thinking of. I don't want to embarrass myself anymore.
I've got another one that ties into basically all the perspective stuff we've already just said. Just kind of bolsters that stuff, but then also seems like it could potentially include like direct instruction, potentially for like boots on the ground stuff, which is our 5 senses are limited. We can only see so far in any one direction from any point at which we are stationed. This is why having the will to find a new standpoint is important. It's how we begin to form a more complete picture. That seems like, it could be specific instructions for boots on the ground. Like, hey, you're only going to be able to see so far here. You're going to need to go around a bend and look again in the same direction, something like that.
Right. I have my last one. It says, I thought the idea sucked. That just seemed so out of place to me. Like throughout the whole book, I don't think there's been like that sort of blatant
Vulgarity.
Yeah. He's talking about, I initially thought of adding the smoky quartz to our treasure. I wasn't interested. I kind of thought the idea sucked. And he says, I kinda. AINDA. It's so strange to me. I mean, I don't know how to make a clue out of that, but I just thought I'd point it out as being something that caught me off guard, as being very loose in language there.
This is the Blake equivalent of my my ease.
Yeah.
My ease issue. It's driving me nuts.
Anyway.
I agree with you though. It stood out to me too.
Yeah.
All right, I got another. My brain synapse that normally receives an image from my retina then scoffs at it as somehow been rent inoperable.
What page is that on?
I don't know. I'm sorry, I didn't put the page numbers down.
Say it one more time.
Oh, here it is. It's at towards the bottom of page 174.
Okay. Oh, here. By the time I read it, by the time I read its description and saw it was a smoky quartz, the brain synapse that normally receives an image from my retina and then scoffs at it had somehow been rent inoperable.
It just felt like a very over the top way to say what he was trying to get at there. I mean, even rereading my quote, I'm like, what?
I think that sentence kind of sucks.
Is there a pretty I was just gonna say,
oh, sorry.
Is there a pretty significant juxtaposition between that and it sucks?
I mean, I think it's intentional with maybe perspective. He's trying to draw more attention to perspective truly being something like that we need to be applying with our vision. Like a literal perspective change versus yeah, I don't know. That just feels like he's very much emphasizing like us processing images in a very literal way. Which maybe then kind of just ties back to the photo, the painting that we have right across from it as well, where our brain can process it two different ways, but very I don't know, forced,
awkward word.
Very awkward. Yeah.
Right. Anybody else got any more, or should we wrap this up?
I got one more, and it's probably not great.
Okay. Does it suck?
It kind of sucks. The quote is, for this reason, it was very important that each item in the treasure had some attribute of personal significance to me. Our treasure would then reflect parts of me to you. It's as if pieces of my soul are now nestled inside our 5 boxes. I'm not a huge Harry Potter guy, but isn't that like the Harry Potter thing? Brand, you're a Harry Potter person.
I mean, it was very Voldemort-y.
Yeah,
the
which I wouldn't
Horcrux.
normally think is
very much a Horcrux.
Yeah, which normally I wouldn't think is a big deal, but I know he's got specific call-outs to like Chronicles of Narnia and Alice in Wonderland, which are a little bit earlier, I think, but still, especially the Chronicles of Narnia, I feel like you could wrap that up in a similar vein to like Harry Potter. I don't know. I'm not the Harry Potter expert. I just got just enough of that to be like, I think I've heard of this somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I almost dismissed it as like, I think he kind of was maybe trying to say what he was trying to say, like in the back of his mind, like using something like the idea of Harry Potter, maybe of like not even directly, but just kind of like, I don't think there's a specific Harry Potter connection here, is my take.
Okay. I don't either. It was my weakest of my flakes, but I wanted to point it out if no one else did.
I know you don't know Harry Potter because divination is a class in Hogwarts.
Wow. Harry Potter theme.
Harry Potter theme.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what I was trying to say is I'm sure like the idea of Horcruxes crossed his mind as he was writing that. I would think that would be a connection he made, but I don't think there was an intent to have Harry Potter there.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your nuggets. I think, we should do themes. Flower theme.
Oh, boy.
Yes,
Oh, boy.
that one I know. Let's do it
Yes.
quickly because
Zip
we're
through 'em
a
quick.
little bit long in the tooth here.
Yeah. Music.
I mean,
Fatherhood.
the quote, maybe.
Oh yeah,
Fatherhood.
Lecrae. Fatherhood. I think there was that one reference to. I can't remember which father, but slight.
Wind.
No.
World's Fair.
Surprisingly, no.
Transcending circumstances.
A little bit, I guess, if you're changing your perspective.
Yeah, I think like overcoming your perspectives, and I could see that.
Maybe if you are the Garnet, if it's from the Garnet's point of view.
Right.
Flower / botanical, yes, obviously.
Heavy.
Water / saltwater.
Not too
Feminism.
much. No.
Celestial.
No.
Hand theme.
Bryn.
Bryn, was your hand theme in there?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think
Blake,
so.
was your ring theme in there?
No.
Huh. Cody, was your quote theme in there? Why, yes, it was.
Heavy.
Huh.
Continue. Oh, that's it.
That's it.
All right. Cool. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to log out now. Have a good night.
Searching for clues, that's my